Hi, and welcome to the Recording Conservatory of Austin. We're coming to you live, as we do every Thursday night. Tonight we have a special presentation, a special event for you guys. We have Serafin Sanchez. Am I saying your name right?
Yep, you got it.
Cool, great.
Nice, man.
From Ableton. Do you want to give them your official title, your job description?
Yeah. So I'm one of our 4 U.S. brand managers.
Great.
Yeah, and I'm also a certified trainer.
Certified trainer, which in the Ableton ecosystem really means something. As an educator, that's something that I find meaningful. You can get Pro Tools certified just by taking the test. But what I found is that Ableton certified instructors definitely have something to offer. And if anyone who's got that badge is probably someone who is credible and worth listening to. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
So Serafin's going to take us through a first block where he'll sort of give us the fundamentals of the software, explain to us how the software is set up, how he likes to use it, and then we'll have a Q&A and a more advanced deep dive later on where I will get to air my grievances. So, without further ado, take us away.
Awesome. Cool. So I know there's a camera rolling. Really, I kind of just want this to feel like it's us, 8 or 9 or 10 of us in the room. So we'll keep it pretty casual. If any point you have questions, just throw up a hand and we'll kind of address things as we go. So what I thought we could dive into first is it might be particularly helpful for people that are brand new to live, is kind of like what makes live unique. Why is it different than other like recording and sequencing software, and especially as a performance tool. So it's another big advantage is that you can use the same screen that you have that you make your music to perform your music. So just really quick about myself, I'm Serafin Sanchez. I'm one of the brand managers. I'm also a musician and an educator. So I grew up playing keyboards and saxophone. I went to school for music. That's kind of my formal training. I did my master's degree in jazz studies in Colorado, where I live currently. And I started using Ableton Live and really making electronic music, kind of in an interesting situation. I was on tour full-time with a jazz big band. And when you're on tour, you have a lot of time on a tour bus to like read books or learn interesting things. And I had a laptop with Ableton Live, and I really kind of went deep into like learning about just audio production and electronic music and sampling and beat making, and kind of learned a lot about Ableton Live. And then in Colorado, I started teaching people how to use Live, and I became a certified trainer and got to know people at Ableton, and just like us all, just became a part of the Ableton community. Cool. So maybe we'll kind of just jump in. Like I said, if you have any questions along the way. So I like to show people that are new to Live this screen first, because this is how a lot of music making programs work, in the sense that you have tracks that go left to right, and things that are on top of each other play at the same time. So we'll just listen to a little bit of music. I always like to show music that I'm working on right now, just because it seems fresh. So this is, something I was working on last week that I figured you just pull up. I'm not shy about showing things in the work. The kind of stuff like the style of music I was making that particular day. Yeah, thanks. So things that are on top of each other usually play at the same time. Nothing new here. The biggest difference visually in Live is that the mixer is on the right-hand side of the screen. So this is your mixer session. So here you have things like, solo, turning on and off the track. Here's your volume. There's your panning. Here's your sends. So typically things that you find on a channel strip. I'll show you a little bit just the geography of the screen. So up here to the left, this is your tempo. So one thing I like, especially in arrangement view, is that everything automatically stays in time. So I don't have to turn anything on or off. There's no menu diving. So if I wanted to hear what this sounds like at a different tempo, I can just move the tempo. Everything's gonna stay in time. So it's just really conducive to kind of a quick workflow. There's your metronome on and off. There's your transport, so start, stop, global record. If I take a section of audio and turn the loop brace on, there's my loop. I can loop certain sections. This view is really good for when you're kind of like at your finishing stages of making music. So when you have ideas already fleshed out and you're going to mix and edit and kind of put things along a timeline, it's really great for this. So you can take something and chop it up, duplicate it, move it along a timeline. This is also the same screen where you're going to do any kind of automation. So Live has a dedicated for automation, so that's going to be found with this button right here. Whoa! You can also use the shortcut key A. So A is going to show and hide all of your automation lanes. This is a feature that's new in 10. So the idea behind this is that you have a place for moving clips, audio and MIDI clips, and then a place for moving automation around. So they wouldn't be fighting over the top of each other. One thing I like about automation is that if I create a breakpoint and then I create another breakpoint, these now snap to the grid. So if I have an eighth note or quarter note grid on it, it places that breakpoint in musical time exactly. There's also some constraint to move it up and down. So if you find a value that you like, it won't slide to the left or the right. It'll stay exactly where you want it vertically. One of the new features that's going to be out in version 10.1, I particularly like, is let's say I wanted this to be exactly 11 decibels. So now I can go to the contextual menu and click Edit Value, and I can type in -11, and it's going to be that exact value. So kind of a frustration that's kind of now solved, particularly like that one.
That's pretty great.
Yeah. Another cool kind of feature as far as automation goes is, let's say I wanted to automate this volume right here. So I'll just hit record. Okay, so now I'm left with this volume automation. And you can see I have a lot of different breakpoints. Something new that was added, if you select all the breakpoints and you go to right click, there's an option to simplify the envelope. So now it draws in that curve with a lot less breakpoints, which makes it a little bit easier to edit. You also saw I kind of zoomed in and zoomed out pretty easily. That's a new shortcut. So the Z key will zoom in to whatever selection that you have, and then the X key will zoom out. So zoom in and zoom out.
Nice.
That's pretty nice. If you double click on any particular clip, it'll open up what's inside that clip, whether it's MIDI or in this case it's an audio. So it'll show you the waveform for an audio clip. Down here to the lower right, you see two different sections. Right now we're in the clip view, the detail view. This is also going to be your device view. So this is going to show you whatever virtual instrument, software instruments on the track, and then also any audio effects or MIDI effects in the order that they're processed. So for example, on this track, I have a utility and an auto filter and then a delay in that order. And then on the left, this is your browser. So, I spend a lot of time in the browser. This is where you're going to find all your samples, all of your third-party plugins, all of your presets, anything like that you're going to add to the project here in the browser. One thing I really love in Live 10, this is also new, is this section right here, which is called Collections. So if you hit the edit button, you can show or hide any of these categories, and you can rename these to be whatever you want. So this is really related to your workflow. So let's say this red category, I can right click, rename it. Mine's called Favorites. Drum kits, loops, Max for Live, mixing tools, synths, gray. Obviously I didn't rename that one yet. So so gray category. This is like if I'm on the plane and I'm just finding cool sounds and presets and I think I want to make a track with these, I'll put it in this category. So they're like things that I want to get going on a new track. But the way it works, so let's say you go to a sound and let's say like an orchestral sound, this brass ensemble, and that's something that you use all the time. And it took me a while to kind of find it in the menu. But what you can do is you can right click, add it to a category. So let's put this in the gray category. Then in this collection, there's that brass ensemble. So this could be any device in Live you can put in these collections. So
can you subdivide those groups?
What'd you say?
Can you subdivide?
Can you like add more?
Again?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Like, can you have folders inside Gray?
Oh no.
Style. Okay.
Yeah, so you can't have folders. You have collections in collections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only
No.
you would want that.
Yeah. That's good. I like how you're thinking though.
Get lost in your folders.
Well, like I copied one of the vengeance packs of like a certain sound effect thing that all moved, and that whole folder, when I right clicked that whole folder was there and it dropped down. But I think you can create one inside of it.
In collections though?
In that top part where it did the color, because I have 10, so I just like clicked one of the folders I use all the time and just put it to the color. And
Okay, so if you like from your user library,
one thing you can do though is you can have sets as collections. So like here's my current project, and then these are all the different live sets in that project. So I can add this set to a collection. Okay. So I can do that. So if let's do that right now. So let's do gray. And then gray, there's that set, and then there's everything in the set. So you can do things like that. So like sometimes what I'll do is I'll make, like if I have like a group of, like a group track of drums, I'll just make that group track a collection. So like, oh, I like the drums that I made in that one project, and I'll just drag that in from collections to another project. So you can kind of like, swap different files from different scenes.
It's similar to Keybase.
So what else? So this is a lot of the geography. Another reason I like the arrangement view is up here, if you right click and you can see you can add a locator. So let's just put some locators in for different parts of the song. So let's call this verse. Let's call this the chorus. Let's make this the ending. And so let's go to the beginning. If I'd hit the verse, it'll jump to any locator, and it'll do that locator at the next beat. So 1, 2.
Does that follow your global quantize?
Yeah, exactly. So if you are performing live, and let's say you're running tracks or you're running like things from your record along the timeline, and you're at the chorus and you want to go back to the verse. 1, 2, 3, 4. And go back to the, or like, okay, we got to end the song. 1, 2, 3, 4, and go there. And yeah, so like Jet said, this all follows your global quantization. So this is set to 1 bar, which means that thing will happen at the beginning of the next bar. Depending on the type of music you're doing or how you're performing with it, like if you're doing live theater, for example, where a certain cue is dependent on like a visual cue. So like when this person walks to this part of the stage, or like when this thing happens, you can have these locators be no global quantization. So it's set to none. So as soon as I press this is gonna start playing. You can do things like that.
Any plans to make independent quantization markers part of this whole thing? So like make that marker not conform to global quantize?
You can do that in session view.
Nice. Well, yeah, but so the markers would have that functionality built in, or so you can do that in session view?
Yeah.
And apply it to a marker?
You can do that to clips.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, clips can be independent. I think in arrangement view, that might be a cool thing too.
That might be, yeah, you can't do that right now.
I'm just wondering. I honestly don't use the markers enough.
So it's kind of a nice way, even in a session, to like be able to fly around to different parts of the song.
Yeah.
Like also right now, and this kind of answers your earlier question, I'm using my trackpad to trigger all these things. And the laptop's interesting because it's definitely a musical instrument. No doubt, it's a musical instrument, but it's also the same machine that I pay my bills with. So we have an interesting relationship with the laptop. So sometimes it's nice to have different kind of tactile feels with playing notes and launching different pieces of music without the trackpad. So one thing you can do is anything on this screen, well, any of the locators, you can map to a QWERTY keyboard or you can map to a MIDI keyboard. So instead of me hitting the trackpad, let's do this with the QWERTY keyboard. So if I go to key mapping, and let's touch the thing you want to map, so the verse, then you press the key you want to map it to. So I'll map this to the 1 button, I'll map this to the 2 button, and I'll map the ending to the 3 button. And I'll go out of key mapping. So if I start it, and I want to jump to the chorus, I press the number 2 key, or go back to the verse. So one thing you mentioned is, can you map, let's say you have your cursor at this part of the session and you want to bring it back to the beginning quickly. You can do that by pressing the stop key. Or let's just map that to something that we don't use a lot on the QWERTY keyboard. So let's go to key mapping, hit the stop key, maybe to the tilde, or I'm already using it. Let's do the number 4 key. There we go. Yeah, so now if my cursor is here, I can hit the 4 key, and then we're back at the beginning again.
Right.
Yeah, or the return key even.
Well, and is it just with the set that you have, or is like going to be across the board?
You can, that would just be with that set.
Cool. Just with that set.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly what I was gonna ask, is if the key map stays per session, so like if you set up a certain key map for one session, that won't, like when you open a new blank session, none of that's key map.
You can actually create templates. You can have it so like every time you load up a new set, certain things are like certain tracks are in there, and you can have multiple templates. Do you know how to do that?
I do not know how to create templates, but in Ableton, I do in Pro Tools, but.
I have a couple of students who are working with Bill Gates and his
They're in the
Academy
producer
ecosystem,
dojo.
and those guys have like an internal set of templates that are expansive and really pretty intricate and pretty cool. A lot of them are kind of overkill if you ask me, but you can find a lot of people's templates online and get a lot of cool ideas from that.
So I mean, I get the benefit of making a template would be for me would be to save time. Mm-hmm. So if there's like certain devices that I know that I already want loaded up, or certain tracks or certain instruments, whatever, I could save that as a template to just help me save time. I like starting with as minimal as possible because then I still get a lot of creativity.
Right. So would you say that like if you wanted to always have those keys, those functions mapped to specific keys, you would just create a template. It would be a blank set, but you would just have a template. Okay, this is a template with all of these mapped already, and you just reuse it over.
Maybe you should just walk us through template creation.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, we'll jump ahead to some advanced stuff, and then I'll come back to show you some of the more fundamental things. So let's go. Yeah, so the way you do this is in your user library. What you want to do is you want to create a folder called templates, and just name it like that, with plural, templates. Then what you want to do is you want to save whatever your live set is in that template folder. So let's make one. So I'll go save live set as, and then I'm going to go to my user folder. There we go, user library. And then there's that templates folder. Okay, and then I'm gonna call this, house music. Let's say like anytime I wanna make house music, I want this particular track to be loaded up. Okay, so now if I go and open a live set, and let's go to documents, user library, I'm going to open this house music ALS file. And the difference between just opening a live set and opening a template is a live set's going to have the name of the set. It's going to be called this song, this project, or whatever. All of your templates are going to say untitled because it's essentially a brand new live set. It just has template information in it. So if I go to house music, there we go. So now it's untitled, and then all my keyboard shortcuts are still there. So I can hit 4, so I hit this, hit number 4, that'll bring it back to the beginning.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the kind of tricky part is just creating that folder called templates, and then getting your set to look exactly how you like it, and then saving it with whatever the template name you want to be in that folder.
Awesome.
Yeah, and you can have as many templates as you want.
Fantastic.
Yeah. The other thing that people often ask is, can you do certain types of video in live? Can you add video? Yes, you can. So let's go in the browser, and let's go to some folder with some videos in it. And the way you add video is just like you do any kind of sample or device. You can just drag it into this section where it says drop files and devices here. So let's go to the, let's see here. Yeah, cat video. Everyone loves a cat video, yeah? Bring it in. There you go. And then it opens up a floating video window. And the nice thing is that you can actually edit this video just like you do an audio clip. So for example, let's put on the quarter note grid, and can maybe chop this up, duplicate the clip. So if you ever wanted to kind of create a creative collage and have the video jump with the tempo of your music, it's very easy to do that. You can also add multiple video clips on the same track. So let's bring this here, maybe that video clip, and let's put another one.
When you say jump with your music, what exactly do you mean? You mean
yeah,
cuts or?
So yeah, the beginning of this video clip is going to be cut in the musical quantization to whatever you have.
I see. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I have, yeah, so a lot, I guess, if you wanted to add multiple videos on the same track, it's very easy to do.
It's an interesting creative tool. Is it, so the video that comes in is in whatever resolution and format it was before you imported it?
Yeah. And there's some there's some guidelines on the site as far as kind of like the best format for video,
right.
The best codecs. Generally, like when you're working with real-time video, as uncompressed as possible is going to be the way to go.
And is there any algorithm in Ableton for compression to save system resources, and so you can? I know on some systems, if you're working with HD video, that can be just a terrible drain on the system.
Yeah, the compressed video actually uses more CPU than the uncompressed because it has to uncompress it in real time. So if you're ever working with video and it's like real laggy, if you do larger video files that are uncompressed, you're gonna have better results.
I think specifically what I'm asking about is in a DAW like Pro Tools, you have the option to render the video back or play the video back at low resolution, even if it's an HD video, just to give you a visual reference. I see what you're
saying. Yeah, so in the export menu, there are some video encoding options on the export.
Right, on the export, but not on this.
Not in this
window.
Yeah, you'd probably have to do any of the video editing or conversion before you bring it into live.
Cool.
Yeah, but I don't know off the top of my head, but there are certain codecs in certain video file formats that have better results.
Yes.
But yeah, I would recommend converting all that before you drop it into live.
It's interesting. It's the way, as with most things, Ableton, you guys have thought about this very differently than pre-existing DAWs. It's an interesting creative tool.
Yeah, so I guess you could use it kind of like how I did in a creative way, like making more of a collage. Or if you did have a video that was picture locked, you could bring that in on the timeline and then score on top of that. And then export your stems to whatever, or export the MIDI and maybe turn that into sheet music for live musicians to play.
So does Ableton sync timecode to frame rate, etc.?
Not natively. There's a Max for Live device that people use for timecodes.
So pretty soon audio post in Ableton, huh? Nice.
Yeah, I mean a lot of people are already using it that way.
Really?
Yeah, with that device.
Full scale production.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Pretty cool. Any questions about kind of like working in this view? Like I said, this view is really good for like when things are already kind of flushed out and you're arranging and mixing. For idea creation and performance, there's a completely different view that really makes live unique. So maybe we'll jump to that?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
do session view.
Awesome. So maybe I'll just start a new live set.
No more más chingón.
What's that?
What's the sample you had in that last library?
Oh, I mangled it pretty bad. It was actually, I think it was like a spaghetti western vocal or
Okay,
like
cool.
something, definitely something country or western. And I reversed it and it sounded more like tribal and African.
Yeah.
Kinda, yeah.
Almost Latin.
Yeah, it sounded like it was in another language because it was reversed. So,
Right.
Yeah. So now what we're looking at is this is live session view. And you can get to arrangement view and session view by using these buttons on the right. And you can kind of see by the graphic that's in the button how it's going to be used. So here the graphic goes left to right because your tracks are from left to right. Now the graphics are up and down because these are the exact same tracks, but now we're looking at them vertically. So you also notice that there are, what is that? I'm getting spam on my computer. All right, let me turn the notifications off. Do not disturb on. Someone's trying to sell me Mediterranean diets while we're doing this presentation. Okay. So you also notice that there's different boxes. What these boxes are containers for musical ideas. So this could be a drum beat, this could be a key, a chord pattern, or this could be like a full track. So people that you hear about DJing in live, they'll put a fully finished track in one of these clips. So let's load some instruments. So let's go to collections, drum kits. Let's find a drum kit maybe. So these are some of the new kits that come with the Live 10 suite. So there's a whole new batch of packs that are really, really amazing, that sound good just kind of right off the bat. So I'll bring one of those. So you can drag the device onto the track and it'll add it. Okay, so let's get some other sounds going here. Let's go and favorite. Maybe that. Oops. And let's maybe find a bass sound. So I'm going to go into one of the packs I use a lot. There's a pack called Beat Tools. And let's go to Sounds and maybe bring this boom sound.
That's an Ableton pack or?
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. So these are all stock sounds. So the reason I like this is because usually when you have some kind of sound, either if it's your guitar or your bass or a drum kit or a synthesizer, you start playing and you get inspired, right? So you're like, oh, this is a cool idea. Oh, that's another cool idea. And maybe you get like 10 cool ideas and you don't really know where on the timeline they go. You just know that you want to get them out of your head into some kind of sketch pad or onto the computer as fast as possible. That's why Session View is really an amazing songwriting tool and idea gathering platform. So let's say with these drum pads right here. Okay, so let's say that's one idea. The next thing you'd have to do is you'd have to turn on the metronome and be like, okay, and then figure out like what tempo that was, and then hit record, and then play it back. So there's something really cool that was in Live 10 called Capture. Have you seen Capture?
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of changed how I record MIDI. So what's happening is it's always listening to your incoming MIDI, and if the tempo is stopped like this, it'll actually figure out what tempo that you played and bring back your last idea. So if I played an idea, so then I hit capture, and on live, this is the capture button. So that was the last 4-bar clip I made, and then it said I'm playing around 91 beats a minute. So when you're just playing something on the fly, you're like, oh, I wish I would have recorded that, hit capture, and it'll bring that idea back into the session. which is really nice. So that's one way to capture an idea. The other one is just to record it with the metronome. So let's turn the metronome on, and let's pick maybe 110. Now all of these buttons right here that are circles, these will enable you to record your idea into the clip. So there's your metronome, and let's put on maybe a 2-bar count in. Okay, so it's an idea with a kick drum. So maybe the next thing you do is you start improvising another pattern over. So maybe with the snare. So let's record that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, copy it, and paste it on here. And then we can record on top of that. So what you're essentially doing is you're creating a lot of different ideas at the same time. I can also do this with push. So I'll turn on the push camera here. It's a little bit hard to see with the light. Can you guys see that okay? Okay. So with push, it knows I have a drum pad selected because of this particular layout. So these are all the samples in the drum pad. This is the loop length. So if you wanted a 1-bar pattern, you press 1 pad. If you wanted a 2-bar pattern, you press 2 pads. And this starts the step sequencer going. So did anybody not use a step sequencer before? Is that a new? Okay, awesome, yeah. So essentially all of these pads represent 1/16th note. And where the green light is where it's playing in that sequence. So for example, if I press the kick drum, I can draw in a pattern. Okay, so now what I do is I'm going to hit duplicate, and it's going to create another clip, and then let's add a snare to that. Maybe slow it down. And hit duplicate again, and let's add some hi-hats. So for the hi-hats, I like to use the repeat function. So the way this works is that if you have a pad pressed down, and it's going to repeat at any of these musical values. So right now it's repeating at a 16th note. Let's record this in, and let's actually make it twice as long. So let's hit double loop and record this idea in. Cool. So just to kind of go back to live, this is what we've made so far. So we have an idea with just a kick drum, a kick and a snare, and then a kick, snare, and hi-hat. Let's add some different parts. So let's go to maybe one with this pads track on it. And this is kind of how I think a lot of people make music is you have an idea, then you find another sound, and you use what sounds cool over that one idea. So then we're left with a bunch of different clips that we can figure out what to do with later. So for this, I'll show you in push as well. So right now, this is how push handles the piano keyboard. So all of the pads represent the root of any particular key. And you can be locked to a key and scale here. So let's say if I want to be in the key of C or G. So I can get all the keys, and then you can also pick your scale. So if I wanted to be in C minor, now the way you can get around in scales is a couple different ways. You can start on a blue pad or a colored pad. You can go across, or you can start on any colored pad and go across in rows of 3, and then go up a row. So just think threes. So yeah, if you know that that's your 1, and that's 2, 3, 4, 5, that triangle shape is going to be your chord in root position. So you can play the triad. Okay, so yeah, so the same thing, yeah, I wish I would have recorded that. Let's go back to capture and hit capture. So I bring back that last idea even though I didn't press record. So it really kind of changed how I record MIDI now. And let's put a bass line in there.
So what's the picture for capture? It's that kind of like open square.
Yeah, it's that one right there. And then on push, you can use capture by pressing record plus the new key. So record plus new is capture on push.
Does that work on push 1?
Yeah, it works on push 1 too. Yeah, so we got some chords going, we got a drum beat going. Let's figure out a bass line. And that's a lot of time you compose. You just have a couple things going and you improvise and you're like, I like that idea. We don't really know where they're going to go yet, but we're just capturing our ideas as we play them. So maybe that last thing. So again, record plus new. Cool. Let's maybe add another track. So let's go to create.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did you mention how far back you can capture?
I did not mention that. Good question. I think technically it goes back 12 or 16,000 MIDI events. Wow. So depending on how long of a time you've waited until the next thing.
Can you tell me what that was? What was it again?
I think 12,000 or 16,000 MIDI events. So that's note on and note off.
MIDI events.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So it doesn't. It just does MIDI note on and off. It won't do capture for automation. So if you play something and then you don't touch the keyboard and then you go get a cup of coffee and come back and hit capture, it'll still be there.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really handy. Let's maybe add one more track. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go here and let's go to instruments. Let's go to pianos.
We were talking earlier about harmonic and overtone texture. I don't know if you guys caught, but in that last pass on this bass patch, Serafin was playing that really low sub-octave, almost as a percussive element in the
Yeah.
beat. That was really cool. And then he had the harmonic movement an octave above it, which is, on that patch, what octave is that super low?
That one. That one is so C3 to C7, C2, probably C1. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's a deep patch. It's a real deep patch.
So if I go back to push, also if I go to browse, anything that's in my live set, I can get to from push. So if I go to, let's say, all my collections are here, all my user files. So really anything that you want to get to, you can get to from push as well. For this, I'm going to grab one of the MIDI effects. So I'm going to use the arpeggiator. And let's change the rate to be maybe 1/16. And then let's add some reverb to this. Actually, let's bring in let's reverb. Maybe back to 8th note. The other thing I like to do with the arpeggiator too is just to turn this to free mode. And make it more of an effect. Let's turn this to really.
Is that kind of a mode people would use a lot for like build-ups? That's like, so you think when people are trying to do their like build-ups?
Yeah, you could totally.
That mode?
So now instead of a rhythm, it kind of just turns into more of a texture. So let's record some of that in there. Cool. So now we have 4 ideas. Yeah, question.
Is that capturing your velocity too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's getting everything. So these are all pressure sensitive. So the more you dig into the pad, it's going to get a harder sound. So now that we have 4 ideas, the kind of the cool thing that you can do next is that you can choose how you want these to come in. So everything that you do in session view can be recorded to the arrangement view. So if I hit record, and let's bring these in a new order. And then maybe you want the bass to come in next, and it's going to wait to the downbeat. And then maybe the drums come in next. And take the drums out. And then maybe we'll bring everything all in on the next measure. So I'll stop it here, but if you peek back over to the arrangement view, everything that we did is now in the linear timeline. So it's kind of more of a musical way of creating arrangements than kind of bringing things in and changing the loop brace and moving back and forth. You can also imagine that if you are performing, so let's say that you have these sounds plus a live drummer and a vocalist and a guitar player, and maybe you want to augment your band with things like this. So let's say you start the show like this, and someone's singing or improvising or just talking to the audience, and then whenever the band looks at each other and you decide the next thing comes in, you can kind of have arrangements that change night to night and that are more on the fly. So maybe they say like guitars like doing some kind of like thumpy guitar part here, and then the drum come in. So it gives you a lot of freedom to perform. The other thing in session view too is that you noticed on the right-hand side, there's also these triangle play buttons. These are called scenes. So what you can do is you can take a row of clips and launch them all at the same time with scenes. So let's say you wanted one scene to be just this pad. Then you wanted another scene to be this pad and the bass. And then you wanted another one to be these three and the drums and the piano. So what you have the option to do is you can launch all those clips with the scene launch right here. So you can do things like that. Questions?
So going back to velocity, what I was trying to ask earlier is like I noticed that like on the last thing that you played, you hit the first key like really hard because you're like trying to get on the downbeat, and then after that, it was softer velocity. Is there a way to like turn that velocity capture off so that way it's consistent every single time? So that like for me too, like I play drums for real life, but playing drums on the keyboard I'm terrible at. I always end up writing it because it's just dropping me.
A couple things you can do. On push, there's a button called accent, which is this one right here. So this will change everything that you play to full velocity.
Nice.
So if you wanted it to be full all the time, you could turn accent on. Back in the software, there's also a really cool MIDI device. If you go to MIDI effects, there's a velocity MIDI effect. So what you can do is let's put this on to the piano. And what we can do is you can see here in the top and the bottom, you have the highest velocity and you can have the lowest velocity. So basically what you're doing is you're kind of compressing upward and downward what you want the maximum and minimum velocity to be.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, so you're saying, okay, I want the highest thing I can ever play to be 75 and the lowest velocity to output it at 43.
Nice.
Yes.
And that's effective on input.
Input.
That's great.
Yeah. So if you don't trust yourself and you're like, sometimes I might hit it too hard, you can kind of create a velocity limiter.
I've done that. Yeah, that's really cool. That's a feature.
Great. Man, there's so many things I can talk about. I guess one other thing I use a lot is a long time I'm creating ideas on the go. Things that I record in my phone. You guys do that? Don't lie, you do. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. I always make the joke like my worst fear is like someone finds my phone with all of my recordings. You're like.
Yep.
So it could be like even like loops and samples that I find, or like things that I play on the piano at home. And a lot of times, like I'll come up with ideas just when I'm with my piano and my phone. We were talking about this earlier. Like here's one I'll show you. So this one, piano idea. Let's try that. Yeah, so this is a chord progression I played and just had my piano sitting on top of I had my phone sitting on top of the piano. It sounds like a phone recording of a piano. But I like the progression. I don't have I maybe want to use that progression, but I want to use a different sound, maybe a better sounding piano or even a synthesizer. So
that's got a lot of vibe. Yeah, it's surprising how many audio samples actually are viable musical options recorded through a cell phone speaker. Sometimes it's got that just crazy compression algorithm, just really does great stuff.
Certain character to it, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a bunch of samples of just random stuff that sounds cool through the phone speaker.
I guess one thing I could do to it, and this is kind of unique to live, is if I right click, I can convert the harmony to a new MIDI track. So what it does is it takes the performance information, the MIDI, and separates it from the sound source, the audio. So let's do harmony to MIDI track, and it'll convert it and create a new track, and there's always the default instrument that comes up with it, but it's MIDI, so we can change that to sound like anything that we want to. So now here's what it turned it into. I'll fold this so you can just see only the MIDI notes that are being used. So it's a start of something. So now I have that progression that I can use to something else. So let's go to maybe back to this pad again. Maybe combine it with the piano. You know, you can also use this, let's say that you have like individual music loops, like this piano or synth loop, and you like the chord progression, but you want to use it with a different sound. You can audio to MIDI, you know, all of your favorite loops and sounds. This works with percussion as well for a couple of different ideas. So let's say that you have a loop like something like this. So yeah, let's turn the loop brace on. Maybe something like that. And so part of the nice thing about having like a real drummer play something is that it grooves, meaning that it's not perfect. It's not perfectly on the grid. Like certain things are played louder and softer, certain things are ahead, certain things are behind. So let's say I like the feel of this drummer or this loop, but I want to use different drums and replace it.
I guess that does beg an interesting question. Do you have record quantize, input quantize on? And did you the whole time you were sequencing?
No.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't think so, because a lot of those beats sounded really cool.
I think I just got lucky.
Nice.
Yeah. No, thanks.
It happens, right?
Yeah. Practice with a metronome. It'll, yeah.
But that's a good thing to watch out for in Ableton or any DAW is the input quantize will sometimes just be quantizing your input if you're recording MIDI, which sometimes is what you want.
Yeah.
Other times it's just the kiss of death, you know, for those deep.
Could just suck the soul out of everything that you play. Or...
A lot of the time it will, unless you're doing trap hi-hats, in which case it's.
Yeah.
That was really cool. I thought how you used the subdivision feature on the push to create those hat patches, because those are really just those are the kinds of things that generally don't require a lot of humanized life. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, certain music is very on the grid, and certain kind of like it relies it to be a little bit off. Yeah, so this, I mean, like, kind of, my point is, if you zoom into the snare, like there's beat 2, and you can see the snare is a little bit in front or behind the beat. Yeah, it's a little bit behind, and then this one right here is a little bit in front, and then even like the hi-hats, you can see the hi-hats are different amplitudes, and the kicks are a little bit different. There's kind of like an imperfection that I like, but different sounds. So I can right-click and go to convert drums to new MIDI. And let's check this one. And then, go to drum kits, maybe find a drum kit, replace it with this one. But what I like is that it does a really good job of finding that transient. So there's beat 2, and then there's that snare that's a little bit after, and then here's beat 4, and then there's that snare that's a little bit in front. So you could use it to replace the whole loop, kick, snare, and hi-hat, or a lot of times what I'll do is, like, if I am recording a drummer, I'll take, condense it to just a kick track, or the kick mic, or the snare mic, and I'll audio to MIDI just a snare, or audio to MIDI just a kick. Then I have a really fast drum replacement that I can swap in with a new sample in the drum rack, or I can layer it in with a sample. So kind of a cool thing to do if you are like multi-tracking a drummer as well.
Yeah. I mean, there are quite a few plugins that sort of do that whole system, and like that's what Trigger's doing, right? It's
yeah.
Converting the audio to MIDI information and then using that to generate new samples. I have found actually that the Ableton algorithms for both percussive content and polyphonic content are really getting pretty good. They're impressive. There was a time when the idea of audio to MIDI was kind of like this weird futuristic thing, and people were playing with like the MIDI pickup on the guitar and stuff. But this is a real feature. One of my favorite things is singing lines. So I'll just like sing a bass line in.
Totally,
and,
yeah.
And Ableton will pick up on, you know, whatever it is, convert it to MIDI, and you can go from there. It's pretty cool.
There's things that you can do to kind of assist it. So for example, like with instruments, if you can get rid of reflections, like room reflections, sometimes it'll think it's a note when it's really just like a harmonic in the room or something like that. Or obviously like solo isolated instruments, it's going to do the best job of detecting pitches. But sometimes it's fun to like abuse the feature and, you know, put in a whole like symphony orchestra recording and see what happens, and then have all this MIDI, which then maybe you put a scale effect on it, and you can kind of create a new, you know, a new idea from something that how it was not supposed to be intended to be used.
Dragging an entire movie's dialogue and audio into it, you know.
Yeah.
Just MIDI turn Shrek the Third into MIDI.
I love it. The other thing I really like and I use in a lot of different ways is Max for Live. And the one reason I like Max for Live is that you don't actually have to know how to develop or make things in Max to use Max for Live. If you do, the nice thing is that anything you make in Max can be directly used with Live, hence Max for Live. But there's also a ton of awesome devices that are already ready-made that you can just start using in your own workflow.
Does everyone know what Max for Live is? Maybe a quick just sort of background on
Yeah. So Max is, you know, for better terms, a visual programming language. It means there's, well, why don't I just show you what it is. So Max is a programming language where you can create things, instruments, effects, ways to manipulate data, and connect also to the outside world. So for example, if you wanted to build some device that, you know, captures the video camera motion and converts that to something that automates a device on your live set, you can do that with Max. So one of the Max for Live devices I like to use a lot is another video device. So this is something that you can use for live performance to kind of create video effects for a live show. So I have a section called Max for Live, and I'm going to bring in one called Rockvid. So I'll put this on my master track. And so it opens up a floating video window, and it looks a lot like a native live device, except for it has this extra icon right here. So that's the Max editing window. So if I click that, it'll start the application Max. There's another application on the computer, and boom. So that's kind of the guts of what a Max device looks like. And if you make things in Max, some of this makes sense to you. This is a fairly advanced one, and I don't know what any of this does right now. But that's okay, because I can still use it. The cool thing is that if you do make things in Max, a lot of these Max for Live devices, you can open them up and you can change them. So for example, like, oh, I'd like this to have an extra effect, or I want to change this to be, you know, green instead of purple. You can do that with Max for Live, and that's actually a great way to learn how to make things in Max, is opening all these other devices. So I'll close this for now, so I'll quit Max.
Question.
Yeah.
People have turned around and like sold their own plugins and stuff, right, for Max for Live.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
do it through Ableton's website, or
most people sell them like things that they make on their own site. Yeah, and there's some amazing developers that are creating all kinds of cool things for Max for Live. But yeah, so here where it says drop movies, that's what we do. So we'll go here and go to our video folder, and let's bring back our friend the cat video. And actually, let's bring all of these in. So let's shift select and bring all 5 of the videos in here. Now I can use this trigger button to scroll through different movies. And the nice thing is that this looks like a live device, so I can map any of these controls to a keyboard or a MIDI controller. So I can have a separate MIDI controller just for video in a live show. So you can do things like you know, change the playback speed, make it go forward and backwards, and I can start to add these different effects So I'll blow this up so it's a little bit easier to see. So this one's particularly designed for live performance in a sense that you can now automate these. So let's say I want this effect to be automated, a sine wave every 1 bar, and I want this one to be a square wave every quarter note, and I want this one to be responsive to volume. I want this one to be responsive by bass, this one to be treble. Let's start there. And then if we start playing our music, you can cut, either have it go automatically with your music, have it be audio responsive, or you can adjust all these things in real time. So that's one of the Max for Live devices I use. There's another really cool one that came out in Live 10 that actually not a lot of people know about. It's called Shaper. So it's this one. So now what you have is you have this envelope shape, which then you can map to anything in your live set. So for example, let's put this on the master track. And let's bring in a audio effect. Let's bring in the auto filter. And let's map this shape to the filter frequency. You can do things like that. You can create your own shapes, take it off the grid, change the rate, change the depth that it's shaping. So things like this are Max for Live that kind of like extend what Live can do in a lot of kind of like practical and creative ways.
God, you think back on all the time you've spent drawing envelopes in and making this. Man, that's awesome.
Yeah. Speaking of envelopes, like another cool thing I'm excited about in 10.1 is all the new.
Is this 10.1 that we've been?
Yeah.
This is the beta?
Yeah, this is the beta.
When does it release?
I actually don't know when the actual release is. It's going to be in beta for a little while.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
And can you co-install the beta with
Yeah.
the standard
Yeah. So the
install?
way that looks is like this. So if you go into Applications, have Live Suite, and then Live 10.1 beta.
Nice.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that we all have to consider, especially those of us trying to work on client timetables. Generally speaking, like it's fun to be an early adopter, but we've got, we have deadlines to meet. You really don't want to take the chance of having any downtime whatsoever. So that co-install is pretty crucial.
Yeah. So you can still keep, your nuts and bolts projects in 10, and then keep trying new things in 10.1.
And remember, stay a year behind on Pro Tools. I mean, they still don't even run on Mojave.
You got me thinking about the shapes. Yeah, so one of the new things is if you go in here, there's this whole new section of automation shapes. So if I select maybe this section right there and go to automation shapes, oops. There we go. You can create all of these automatic shapes. Then you can go in here and start to kind of skew them and stretch them around, and really kind of design kind of a quick way to get like really intricate automation shapes happening.
And they'll edit right down to the sampling, yeah?
Yeah, audio will now.
That's awesome.
Yes, if you
I
bring.
had a student one time who was absolutely dedicated to the Ableton environment, just couldn't work anywhere else because you guys were the first ones that had parabolic envelope shaping.
Okay.
And he's like, oh, the parabola, it's really important in my my composition. Go to explain that you can actually automate any envelope down to the sample or the tick, I guess. You guys were probably using ticks for envelopes, or?
For samples, it's going to be, for audio, it's going to be samples, and
Sure.
then for MIDI, it would be ticks.
So, you can make your own parabola, but this is fast.
I mean, like, cool thing in 10 is now, like, if you go down to the sample level, see all those dots? Now those are all, you know, the sample dots. So if you need to do that, I guess it's there. Which is kind of a cool thing. Yeah, I know we have limited time, so I guess if there are any kind of specific questions,
Yeah.
that might be the best use of our time. Because I can just talk and talk and talk. So.
Yeah. So I just got one right off the bat.
Oh, for you, yeah.
What is with the gain structure in Ableton Live? Like, why is it that when I told you I was gonna come at you. Why is it that when I bring in like any two Ableton instruments and play one part on top of the other, immediately I'm redlining the master fader? Like I noticed when you were working with your sequence earlier, one of the things I really loved about the push was that you were able to quickly go over to your mixer, and because Serafin really knows what he's doing, he turned his bass patch down, his drum patch down. He didn't crank the arpeggiated synth he was working on up. But that's a basic question I have as a music producer who is also a mixer and a mastering engineer. I find that when I work in the in the native Ableton environment, I have to basically start my process by turning everything I bring in down by 10 dB.
I do that too for
Right.
good mixes. I start, you know, everything like between 6 and 12 dB, bring it really down. Because with utility, you probably use utility a lot.
Yeah, I mean that can dovetails into my second question. Why isn't utility built into every track? And can we just do that? Like, can we please have a DAW that has a phase flip button on every channel?
I kind of do that actually. So like what I do is I'll go.
Right. So like a lot of our templates are going to have those built in.
So you can have. Do you have default audio tracks?
What do you mean?
So okay, so I added utility to this audio track, right? And
Sure, yeah, set to default.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now, like, let me delete it. Every time I bring in an audio track, it has utility on it.
So that's a great answer. I think that's probably the type of the type of karate that Ableton is going to bring back at me every time I have a complaint like this.
Yeah.
I do find that I can customize both the GUI and the workflows in order to be the thing I want it to be.
Yeah. I think a lot of maybe some of the reason is that this is kind of cool is that everyone uses live very different. It's I kind of tell people it's like a guitar.
Yes, but like I don't think any of us are really trying to blow out our 24 bits at the end of the day. Like, is anyone here redlining the master fader just as a musical choice? I guess I've just always been curious.
Is it certain instruments? Because I mean, it's just kind of always like being mindful of gain, and you know, if you're not, then you know you learn to.
I guess there's a suspicious part of me that believes it's a purposeful action on the part of, I think, a lot of the composition DAWs, Logic, Fruity Loops, Ableton, all do this in order to make you feel like every new sound you bring in is dope as fuck because it's loud and you get that Fletcher Munson boost and you get that speaker excursion. And
I actually think Ableton has the opposite. I mean, I find myself, especially individual instruments, bringing the volume up.
I guess it really depends, obviously, on the kind of track.
Yeah.
I'm thinking mostly about the big drum patches, the big bass patches, which tend to be my starting point.
Yeah.
I find that most of the way the Ableton native environment is kind of set up, immediately up around -6 and pushing redline. But I really hammer on those pads too, so.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe if I was just a more tasteful player.
Yeah, I mean, my answer will probably be the same: is go in and change the default volumes and presets for everything. So like even wavetable. So let's say
No, I fully have.
-9 is too much, -6, and then go in and say save as default preset.
Yeah.
And now everything's gonna always be -6.
I guess a part of me is looking to a software environment like Ableton to lead the way into digital, and to bring the digital ethos into what it really can be. I think we're finally over the analog hangover, the idea that we need a $1,000 circuit in order to make anything sound good, and the solution to everything in analog is just turn it up. Where in digital we have this calibration point. Every single signal can maintain a peak level that lets you analyze the signal at every point and then assign it a relative gain in that 24 bits at the end of the day. I just really love to see a DAW like Ableton ask its users to rise to meet it, where it is. I don't know. I figure I've got you here.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, actually, I kind of like the amount of control that you have over gain, especially like between devices. So like this little meter right here, even though it's so small, I can actually see like if I'm distorting between plugins, which is really helpful and sometimes hard to see like with other music making software.
Yeah.
Like if you're hitting this plugin too hard.
It's not. You should just keep your gain structure all the way down or low enough that you're never in danger of clipping between plugins. And you should know if your stage of gain has some kind of saturative algorithm that's going on with some kind of ceiling, in which case you're going to be pushing into that. But as long as you understand how each of your stages is gain staged, you really shouldn't have this wonder if you're clipping between plugins. Which, on something like Logic or Pro Tools, there's no meter between the plugins.
Yeah.
And so I always bristle at people saying, well, what if I'm clipping between the plugins? Well, stop cranking everything up and then turning your faders down by 10 dB at the end of the day. I do love the meters in between plugins, partially because I love digital clipping as a means of, as a means of dynamic leveling on something like a kick drum. You can usually get two.
No, I just love that you talked about keeping down, and then you just said, and I also love digital clipping.
I love it because I can crank it up. But, so I had a really interesting class with a student the other day who was using, what's that free multiband compressor, OTT?
Yeah.
To do, to really bring her wubs to life. And it's true that the before and after was like night and day, but really OTT was not even hitting the threshold. And what she was doing was clipping the shit out of the signal between plugins without kind of realizing it. So there was a baked-in lesson about compression and understanding your gain structure. But the ability to clip between plugins and get some of those gnarly new agey digital sounds.
Yeah, totally. Like if you
really
want to drive it into certain plugins, it has a sound, and sometimes you can do that.
So that brings up another question.
Like if you want to do that, like just throw a utility between two different devices. And
so is utility a fixed 24 bits, or is that floating in 32?
That's 32.
Right. So eventually, I feel like eventually you have to print this audio clipped at some gain stage in order to get that fixed, in order for the 32-bit mixer not to kind of bring you back. So for people like me that want that 1 dB, 2 dB of clipping sometimes, 32-bit float can actually be kind of a pain in the ass.
So there's this really cool Max for Live device called Outist.
Outist.
Have you heard of this?
No.
Like out. It's basically like an out, like an external out at any point in your gain stage.
Oh, okay. So that is.
So if you wanted the out to be before the saturator, after the saturator, before the utility, you could put an outist in there, and then take that signal out and print it to another track at any point in your signal flow.
That will fix my 24 bits. That fixes my clip.
It could, I mean, if you wanted to bounce it at that point in the clip, you could send that and print it to another audio track.
That's one of the things that Pro Tools has a lot of trouble with. It has a lot of trouble not saving you, not bringing your gain structure back by floating your 24 bits back next time you pull a fader down. Which is one of the reasons we should always look at whether a DAW is operating 24-bit files or 32-bit files. Is there a setting? There's a setting for that in Live 10, yeah?
For a setting for what?
The setting would be whether your 24-bit files in your audio components are saved with 32-bit float information encoded.
Oh, okay. That's going to be...
Because in Pro Tools, that's the one that will basically prevent you from ever being able to clip your gain structure. And it's the one that is...
there is on export.
On export, yeah. Okay, cool. Right.
Yeah, so you can go and set the bit depth to be 32-bit.
And my understanding is...
I know what you're talking about, though.
Any DAW that gives you this option, it's really just on export. The mixer's going to operate in 32-bit float.
Yeah.
So next time your mastering engineer tells you that you need 6 dB of headroom, just send them a clipped file and tell them to turn it down 6 dB, 32-bit float.
Yeah. Yeah. So then that would be able to be saved.
Yeah, exactly.
In there.
Which, again, in my original example, I don't want. You know, like I'm trying to clip it so that I get that extra little boost.
One thing I do like on this that I think is kind of not really looked on is like you have an option to convert to mono on export, so that if you have tracks that are true mono, like if I'm making stems, for example, I'll do a whole render of stereo, and then I'll do a whole nother folder of mono, and then I'll send stereo this to that, mono to this, especially if I want to go and like mix on a console. It saves the channels because I'll know that, you know, it's not a split stereo, it's a true mono. So
like in the analog domain, we have true mono. And one of the things I love about the way Ableton is coded architecturally is that it doesn't really acquiesce to this idea that somehow you can have true mono in a stereo digital environment. Really what you have is uniform stereo that gives you the impression of a monaural signal.
yeah, visually it looks the same. It just depends on like the incoming.
And unless I'm wrong, Ableton also codes it the same, meaning that this is one of the great philosophical questions we can ask: is there really a difference? Because there isn't. Like the mono information would be the same in the left and the right, yeah?
Yeah.
But in order to have those two audio streams in digital, we have to have a left and we have to have a right. As opposed to on a console where you have one wire, you can have a true discrete mono path, you know?
Right. And back to your, does it matter?
Well, it only matters if you're so used to your mono tracks in Pro Tools that you need to keep fooling yourself.
Yeah.
So I just love the teachable moment.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, it's there, so why not talk about it?
So what about pan law though? If you convert to mono, you're going to get some kind of a boost or cut from whatever the pan law is?
Probably, depending on how you're panning it. I mean, like now in 10 it kind of changed the game a little bit because now you can go to like split stereo pan.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And that would be. Do you know what the pan law is on that?
I'd have to look it up. I want to say 3.
Probably default 3. Mike White, what's pan law?
I know what pan law is. Don't put me on the spot.
I just haven't seen you in a while, man.
Yeah,
it's good.
No, this is cool because we're at a recording school and we can.
Yeah.
Everyone's learning about these things, so we can kind of really get in the weeds, which is awesome.
Fully.
Another kind of we're just talking about recording options. This is also new in 10. Is there's now an option to include return and master effects on your exported tracks. So, like for example, like if I had sends on this track and I had different sends on this track, and I did the option to export individual tracks. So I wanted to make stems or just individual tracks. Now all those return and master effects are going to be rendered into those stems.
Right.
Which was very, very time consuming to do.
Oh, man.
You said have to uncheck every
Yeah. Well, you'd have to solo it and then run the track and then solo the next one and then run the track.
Yeah, that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
What's it do with like groups at this point when you're trying to export?
Yeah, so basically just a group can be an individual track.
Mm-hmm.
So like, let's, for example, let's just make a bunch
So
of
the
kind of.
default would export the group and all the component tracks within the group, right?
Yeah, so like say that's a group and
So how do you
that's a
manage the
group.
summing within a group? I've been kind of longing for this kind of filing capability, just like a group all and collapse, where that won't sum through the group. Like just a way of, I love the way Ableton lets me organize my tracks into collapsible accordion style.
Groups within groups within groups.
Well, but what I guess what I find that I want is the ability to do that without summing the tracks at the group.
Yeah,
So like these tracks would all independently route to the master, but would be in this folder that would expand and contract.
I see what you're saying. So you want them to route to the master?
Well, I want to have the option. So like
Because that's what that's the way they are now, right? Is that what you mean?
Right, but they're via the group.
Yes.
Right. So in order to
So it's going track to group to master.
Right, and so what I would love to have is just the group, where instead of the routing to the group, these all route to master, but still collapse with a little fun little
Oh,
tab.
so you just want it to be as like an organizational
It's an
thing.
organizational tool.
Oh,
I
gotcha.
want to have the option.
Yeah, or like to hide tracks and things like that.
Exactly,
That would be
exactly.
That's
Because a lot
kinda
of the
cool.
time I really don't want to sum my tracks yet, but I want to just collapse them.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. Yeah, you can't currently do that
Right.
as an organizational feature. It's
Which-
only like a sound processing feature.
I guess sort of brings me to ultimate question, which is the flexibility of ins, outs, mixer returns, and overall, I think Ableton is like just a heavy hitter as far as knowing what I want. Like it's so nice to work in a DAW that seems to understand the thing I want from it.
Cool.
As opposed to most other DAWs, which feel like I really have to like, no, not that thing. However, like input and output flexibility is not, so like if I wanted to output to 3 different monitor systems, to 3 different outputs, it's kind of just like computer says no.
So like instead of saying out to this track, you want to say this track, and that track?
No, like output to this master, another master, 2 other masters, like 3 sets of speakers through 3 different outputs on my.
Oh, I see it.
On my
Yeah,
interface.
I think the workaround that most people do, maybe this is what you do, is
Yeah.
through sends.
Yeah, I pretty much just run Pro Tools.
So like you would say out to sends only,
Right.
and then like the return for this send would be to
Yeah.
monitoring system
So
A.
like that's a workaround, and,
Yeah.
and it kind of works, but it feels like a hack, and it feels like there's just a few missing chunks of code for Ableton. I sort of long for the day when this can be the DAW that I use, but there are still some reasons why, in general, by the time I'm hitting arrangement view, I'm pretty much just exporting to Pro Tools.
And mixing and
And mastering in Pro Tools, partially because I'm just used to that environment, but I think partially because there are some building blocks of good mixing and mastering code, like being able to use more than one set of monitors and flip between several different outputs, and
So you're saying like this track would go out to 2 different masters at the same time? Is that okay?
yeah, which
Yeah.
is
Is that where like in Pro Tools you like hold down command and you have that little dot when you can
well,
put the,
or you just create a second aux input that routes to another output on your audio interface.
Gotcha.
In Ableton, you get the master, and the master is like baked in, like that's the master, like it would be on a console, which is kind of what surprises me about the fact that it's Ableton that does that, whereas Pro Tools just like, oh, create another master and route it to a different output.
Yeah. I would say for now there's the workarounds. There's sends
Yeah.
or use something like Outist.
So Outist is something I need to check out.
Yeah.
I love the ability to kind of do, if I can get that going, that loses a lot of the reason to go to Pro Tools. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
But I mean it's cool that we're in a school and learning environment. So
Yeah.
arming yourself with a lot of different options and tools
Yeah.
in your belt is definitely great.
Mhm.
Including live. So
I love that Ableton plays well with other DAWs in general. Rewire, is that, what's the future plans for Rewire? Is that something you guys plan to incorporate more or less, or is that code old, or what's the deal with that?
no, I mean Rewire. I think live was one of the first DAWs to rewire,
Right, but
and
9 ditched it, and then 10 brought some
Yeah.
versions of it back. Did
no,
it?
it's in there. Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
it's still in there.
but didn't version 9 like pretty much cut the cord with Rewire?
No,
I know for a while there Rewire wasn't working for me, but you guys, it's all.
I
It's
thought
all
I
good.
had a period 2. Like
Yeah,
that.
I could have sworn when 9
So
first
it's-
came out.
actually they've added more options in Rewire. Like now they've kind of brought in where in 10 you can use Rewire. You can use push as a slave device in Rewire.
Awesome.
So kind of adding like more functionality.
Yeah.
Like,
So, guess Rewire, probably Reason into Ableton, I guess, for the sounds.
I mean, whatever with Rewire. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Rewire the Pro Tools and DAW exporter stones.
Well, the problem is then you're in Pro Tools.
And
Like-
live can be a tempo.
Right, but at that point, like there are very few circumstances where I actually want to have the 2 DAWs open at the same time and routing like MIDI information back and forth. It's kind of cumbersome. Where I guess if I can just do, it's interesting right now to see how people segment their thought process when it comes to their productions. The turnover point where I want to be in this DAW or that DAW, or as soon as I can go to audio, or whatever your cutoff point is or whatever your reasons for being one DAW or another.
Yeah.
It's kind of a fascinating, fascinating world of audio we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
Can you talk about Link real quick?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, do you use Link?
Yeah, I have. I love it.
Yeah.
It's pretty great.
Do you guys know what Link is?
Yeah, I haven't used it though.
So yeah, it kind of changes how you share time, tempo information between any two Link-enabled devices. So if scenarios would be like two laptops that are connected to the same wireless network, or
CDJs.
a laptop and a device, an iOS device or Android, or even just like two iPhones. You don't need Ableton Live to do this. Anything that has Link can share tempo information. So essentially, there's no like control and follow device. So like there's not one that's always controlling the tempo and one that's always following. Anyone can change tempo information anytime, just like a band. So if like the bass player's dragging, you're gonna go down. If the drummer's rushing, you're gonna go up. So as a performance tool, it's awesome because we can set up on stage and share tempo.
Especially with the little nudge up and nudge down tempo features. I mean, it really is starting to be possible to play Ableton along with just a live performance. Just a drummer kicking a beat, and you can kind of keep the tempo synced either through taps or through the nudge up, nudge down.
I'm not checking my email. I'm loading up a Link app right now.
Nice.
So like one that I use, this is the free one, by the way. It's by Soundbrenner, Soundbrenner. They make like the haptic devices, but they have a metronome, like a click metronome that's Link enabled. So the reason that this is really cool is if you just need a wireless click, you can have your session in live linked up to the wireless click. And then if you have a drummer that's playing to a laptop, or even just two people that want to share a metronome wirelessly, super fast click. So the way I set this up is I believe I'm on the same wireless network as the computer. So I'm just going to turn on Link. And then in the app, I'm just going to enable Ableton Link. There you go. I'm not sure if there's any firewalls on this wireless network. There may be.
Probably a bunch of Russian hackers.
Yeah. So usually I set this up. I'll just create an ad hoc network on my phone.
There you go.
Oh, yeah, we're on. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. So there we go. So if I play the metronome here. So now we're in time. So if I wanted, let's say I'm a band member and I want to speed up. Or if I wanted to go here and slow down. Or if I wanted to stop and then come back in, 2, 3, 4. If I wanted to stop this can keep going, and then I can come back in with the laptop.
Nice. Yeah, I'm excited for this, for Link to kind of open the door for, I don't know if you use TouchOSC at all.
I don't, but I know it's an amazing
tool.
tool.
There are a couple of controllerist apps that let you create MIDI controller environments through a bridge app, so you can have custom MIDI controller buttons on a touch screen or whatever, but they've always required some sort of software bridge. So you have to run the app environment in the background, and those are always pretty janky and never keep up with updates. So to have this baked in is pretty killer.
For songwriting, it's kind of cool. So like if I'm working on drums and you're working on like a keys part, we can share tempo information and be working on the same session on different computers. So it's nice for songwriting.
You hear that, Mike? Right? We can jam.
Yeah. Actually, the first time I used Link was in a van full of musicians. Someone made a hotspot on their phone, and I had a Link app, and he had a Link app, and then we were synced. So there were no laptops involved. It was just like device to device. Yeah, totally. Yeah. There's high-fiving going on.
Yeah, exactly. Questions? Other questions?
My biggest question was the synths thing, man. I've been wondering that for a long time.
What are you using that many cents for?
Because I mix in Ableton.
I get that.
Yeah.
Still. What are you
Because
using? Like,
a lot of extra touches. There's different effects you can do. Like tons of things you can do with sends.
are you sending sends to sends?
I do that too.
Are you interlooping all your
It
sends?
just depends.
Depends on the sound.
We should schedule a class together. My guess is you probably got some concave, convoluted systems that we could probably simplify.
No.
No? So you've been right in the past when you said that. So I'd be interested to see. But it seems like that's a lot of sends. It's a suspicious number of sends.
I just don't like being capped.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Remove all restraints.
Yeah. I think I mentioned it before you got here. So we talked about 10.1 and some of the features that are in that. That's a public beta. So what that means is that Ableton Live has a beta system where anyone can sign up for and try out these features. But the other cool thing is that on there, there's a feature request list. And that feature request list, developers monitor that. And that's how they kind of, one of the things they use to prioritize what things they're working on and what things go into future versions. So like with 10.1, the ability to freeze track with sidechain devices was very high on the list. That's now, you can do that now. And then also the ability to kind of drag user-generated wavetables into the new synthesizer wavetable. That was high, and now that's in 10.1. So not everything that's high on the list is currently in a version of Live, but it lets the developers know what people are interested in and kind of help them prioritize future versions.
And both of those features are pretty stable in the beta?
Super stable, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I can show you right now. So like if you go and let's bring in a wavetable here. There we go. And then, yeah, so you can download wavetables off the internet. You can use your Serum wavetables. You can bring a drum loop in and use that as a wavetable. Here's some wavetables I downloaded from the guys over at Warp Academy. Yeah, so. That one's, bring that in there. Super aggressive. You can bring those in, bring a drum loop in. The cool thing about the wavetable now is you can use it in the default mode, which kind of like chops the wavetable into the exact amount of samples and applies some smoothing and normalizing. Or you can use it in raw mode, which doesn't do any smoothing or any normalizing. So if you wanted to get some unexpected results, you can use it as raw as well.
If you like things to sound shitty, you've got that button.
You got, and so same thing with audio effects. So like you put a compressor on there and then, you know, apply the side chain towards something. Typically you wouldn't be able to freeze this now. So now if I go and freeze track, there you go.
Yeah, that's an everyday thing.
Yeah.
That's killer.
But yeah, so it's ableton.centercode.com and you can download 10.1, the beta version, tonight and check it out.
Or probably google.com, just Google like download Ableton beta.
Yeah.
They come up, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one thing that we try to push real hard here is google.com for all of your question needs. By the way, any of you guys in the watching online and in the forums, if you ask a question that really would just be better typed into Google, I'll let you know and just copy and paste your question here into Google. Things like, what are the system requirements for Ableton 10? Like, dude, just Google it. I'm not gonna ask that question. So, how are we feeling?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Good. Everyone's got Valentine's Day tonight?
Yeah.
I know it is Valentine's Day, so I mean, we're hardcore being here. I appreciate it. Yeah. Some awesome questions, and it was a treat to be here tonight, so.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having
Hell
me.
yeah.
Yeah.
This has been awesome.
Yeah, love to come back anytime.
Yeah, definitely.
Please.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Often.
Super informational.
Yeah.
Let's do it, yeah. I mean, Austin is an amazing music community, huge Ableton community. You guys have an Ableton user group here in the town. I think there's a meeting this Sunday. There's also going to be a user group meeting during South by Week.
Nice.
So look out for those. There's a meetup or a Facebook page for those user groups. Yeah,
Hell yeah.
awesome.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Serafin.
thank you, YouTube, wherever they can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, YouTube.